Hey everybody, welcome to our talk. For those of you that are new here, like welcome. For people that have seen like us do this talk since 2019, welcome back. So we're going to be roasting the top sort of like worst stories of last year. In this case, 2025. And yes, this time we're kind of using Zuck as our sort of like mascot that we're dunking on for our slide theme because it's an oldie but a goodie, as it were. All right. So I'll let Yael introduce yourself.
Hi, everybody. I'm Yael. I am a program manager at a nonprofit organization that I'm not going to mention the name of because I'm here in my own personal capacity for this roast. And I have committed acts of journalism, and I help people move out, remove their name from people search sites. And one time between DEF CONs, I got a master's degree in journalism.
Hello, everybody. I'm David Huerta. I'm with the Freedom of the Press Foundation, but similarly to Yael, I am not here representing FPF, but just kind of my own sort of like fun shenanigans and, tomfoolery. So that's why I'm here. I also sometimes commit acts of journalism. You can see some bylines and like, I guess, archive links now, because some of these publications, half of them are like gone. But they're there. Yeah, the press media landscape is very healthy right now. Also, I helped co-found Heatsink Labs. You should go check it out. It's down the street. Go get stuff soldered. Go to this thing. It's really great. So, and some amazing people from Heatsink are also among us right now. So you should go say hi to them. All right, so welcome back to our annual grill. This is going to be what we're roasting. We are going to be talking about, in this case, news articles. What we're leaving out is sort of this like tsunami of like malarkey and nonsense that is everything else that also produces misinformation, disinformation, things like marketing, PR, op-eds, TV news, and just like individual like posts on Blue Sky or X or whatever social media platform people are actually using. All right.
Every year when we do this, we always end up roasting people we really like, and I always feel really bad about it. But just a disclaimer: just because we don't like an article doesn't mean that that author is bad every time, or that the publication they write for is bad every time. And even if a publication is bad, that doesn't mean the industry is bad every time. We actually really like journalists, including some of the ones that we're roasting. It's sort of like clickbait. We draw you in with this headline, and then make it educational because we actually want to focus on ways that people can improve instead of just roasting them.
All right, so we have exactly one theme, oldies but goodies, because you may notice some patterns. I promise these are actual news stories from the year 2025, but it is kind of the same stories from like other years as well that just happen to have been sort of like regurgitated back into the media cycle. So this first one, just to kick us off, is, understanding Tor is hard. So I love The Guardian. I subscribe to The Guardian. I have the Guardian app, the Guardian magazine, great stuff. But like this one article, I'm just like, oh dear. All right, so this was basically saying, hey, did you know that there's crime on the dark web? And yes, there is, and it is bad. In this case, so there is a certain sort of like technical misunderstanding of like how these things work. And in many cases, like you have this idea of just like, yeah, that it sort of treats it almost as if like Tor is a service, a platform like Facebook, like X, where you would have this sort of like governance or ownership of the content of it. Although there's nuances to that because of like safe harbor clause, et cetera, DMCA. But in this case, like it sort of takes this approach of like the equivalent of asking the IETF to like take down like online harassment post on X. It's like you don't go to the IETF to like change protocols for the internet. You go to the platform owner. And there's a little bit of a sort of like there is a kind of like a war drum to this of just like, oh, the only way they can be removed is if like the specific 501c3 nonprofit Tor project removes these sites. They don't have the capability to do that because again, Tor onion services are a protocol, not a platform. But also like cybercrime has been taken down. And I think part of the kind of like real questions to ask here is like, why is it that law enforcement is focusing on taking down sites that are harming capital rather than harming children? Just saying. So, and this has consequences. Like we can kind of see like a lot of the sort of like grant work that projects like the Tor project depends on are already kind of like being hit by this kind of misperception of how they actually work, et cetera. So that's, and there's a lot of understandable reasons for how, these kind of mistakes happen. It's like the idea of how Tor even works or like how the internet works is not something that is made transparent and visible to its end users. Like for most people, Facebook is the internet and there is no necessarily like deeper level of understanding beyond that point. So you can imagine like then going to explain like, oh, this is the internet and also this is Tor and this is this whole other complicated thing. It's hard. It's understandably hard. Um, there's also the historical context. If you're making a claim, like check to see whether that's actually true. Like how has law enforcement dealt with this in the past? Have they? How does that work? Did they have to like go to the Tor board to like take down sites? No, because they can't. They went through other means. All right, there you go.
Okay. So this next article is by one of my favorite journalists of all time, Dan Gooden, for one of my favorite publications. And it's technically correct, the best kind of correct. It is about research about how you can bypass juice jacking defenses. But that's probably not going to happen. So yes, somebody could totally add malicious hardware into the specific USB port that you plan on using, but it's probably not that likely, which is probably why this has never been detected in the wild. And the article tells you not to charge your phone in public if your phone doesn't support Google's new auth requirements, which is true. But now we're making people really nervous about using public USB charging stations, even though, like, one, this hasn't happened. Two, phones block data transfer by default when charging, and they prompt you before allowing data access, which is why there's a new site, an open letter called Stop Hacklore that is like, please stop focusing on these things that are really not that important and are stopping people from doing things that are important. And you can check out that site for more. But I just want to point out that, like, for most people, if you don't have battery on your phone, that's like actually an emergency in a lot of cases. Like, how are you going to get home? Like, what if a street is closed or you take a wrong exit and then you're completely lost and you didn't print out your MapQuest directions? How are you going to use your ride sharing app from the bar if you don't have any battery? What if somebody has to call or text you because there is an emergency and they can't get a hold of you? Or what if the event you're going to gets canceled, or you're at the wrong cafe waiting for somebody who is in the other location? And you're like, well, sorry, my phone is dead, but I can't charge it because it might get juice jacked. And then I usually carry around a power bank, but those also sadly run out of juice. And I rely on David, who has hooked me up with his spare twice in the past 2 days. But one of the things I learned in survival school is that you focus on, like, what is going to kill you first. And I'm guessing that it's the person who is following me when I don't even have a phone. Beyond like this juice jacking thing. So I feel like this article again was technically correct. It even itself says these warnings are mostly fear mongering. There are no documented cases of such attacks in the wild. But like sadly, most people don't actually read articles. They just read the headlines and skim and get panicked. And I kind of blame Ars Technica for this because they ask their reporters to do one post a day. And I feel like that's when you start kind of writing about research that isn't really relevant for everybody. So yeah.
All right, so we have a recurring version of this. I think every year, it's almost like a sort of like political pendulum where it's either a far right publication that's saying that like Signal is secretly the deep state, or a far left publication that is saying that it's the CIA, like dog pigs or whatever. So in this case, there's a few like weird criticisms about this in terms of just like, hey, maybe we shouldn't rely on Signal because they get funding from the government, and also they pay their workers competitive salaries for the most expensive city in North America. Actually, no, Vancouver might be time for that, but I was going to that. And I think people don't know like where exactly, for those of you familiar with this XKCD graph, like how like the technology in their smartphone and also all the satellites that tell you where your smartphone is on the planet came to exist. So please Google DARPA. There's also the point that it's like, hey, you're using cloud services, and that means that your end-to-end encrypted data is going through the cloud services. Aren't you concerned about that? Why didn't they just roll their own? I'm like, my dude, it's 2008. like creating like at scale infrastructure quickly is not something you can just like really do unless you want to become a cloud service provider yourself. Um, and then there was like collaboration between Signal and Google because like some of Signal's users were getting like hacked and some other people were targeting their Android exploits. And they're like, hey, Google, wouldn't it be great if like Android users didn't get hacked, and that makes them evil collaborators. There's also just saying that's like, hey, did you know that if you have a keylogger, end-to-end encryption doesn't matter? It's like, yes, because at that point, like your entire like input to your computer is owned. Like there's no real reason to say that is a specific concern to Signal. And then there's just like, well, why don't they ask them to download after it? It's like, okay, I don't know if any of you remember the way people used to have to download Adobe Acrobat, where you had like 3 different apps that you had to install. You lost track of what you were originally trying to do because you had to install the app cloud installer, and then like it's like, what was I originally trying to get? Like this is why people don't recommend that. And then it's just like, try low tech, which always leads to people saying that they're going to bring like a burner dumb phone to things. And then it's like, cool, now you're just sending plain text and like phone call metadata to the nearest stingray. Great. That's not exactly a security improvement. And then of course the big thing about this that really like ruffled my feathers is just the fact they're like, they gave away the phone number of the Signal user for the subpoena. And I'm like, I've read that grand jury subpoena. I know exactly what that request said, and here it is. So that basically said, like, give us the information that you have on this user who has these phone numbers. The feds already had the phone number. Like, it's not new information for them. All they got was the account creation time and the date of and time of last activity. They already had the phone number. So it's just kind of like a weird moot point that was like left out of context. And yeah, so it's just like really hard to like, you can't really like make a completely ethical decision on your politics or stated principles when it comes to smartphones, because like, did you know that it's made of rocks? Did you know where those rocks come from? Conflict zones. So there's just like kind of like ethical dilemmas and turtles all the way down, unfortunately, with these things. And there's also just like understanding of economics, but that, you know, just happens sometimes. All right.
Don't use Telegram. So this article is about 16 billion passwords that were exposed in a record-breaking data breach. What does that mean for you? Except for that it might not actually be a new data breach. Oh wait, here it says that there were 16 billion passwords leaked. This is the biggest credential leak in history of previous credential leaks. So there was an update on this story, which was kind of vague, saying that it included details on how to switch from passwords to passkeys, and new input on these 16 billion credentials, mother of all leaks. But Cyberscoop did a really good job of writing about how the 16 billion password breach story was a farce, because basically 2 stories said none of these data leaks were leaked previously, but their evidence was 3 screenshots, and it was actually an old password dump that was repackaged and re-released. So I think the issue here is that sometimes people don't do their own work and they just repeat claims from other journalists, including security companies, because Keeper Security also repeated these claims. And like, yes, we think you should use unique passwords for each account plus non-SMS based MFA like a security key, but that doesn't mean you don't have to make up 16 billion. You don't have to like publish disinformation about leaks that have already previously been released.
All right, so this is a story about the ESP chips in your badge, probably, I think. I didn't actually look up the model number or specification, but I think it was talking about the same ones, saying that there was a backdoor found. Apparently, that's not what that means. It was just some like internal commands used for like QA and testing. And they found that out later. But yeah, basically 2 researchers found these kind of like undocumented functions that would also require like physical access in most cases to actually like implement something. It's like, well, if you have physical access to it, why do you have whatever? Anyway, so in this case, like sometimes things that just look really boring, like might look very like suspicious and crazy when they're just kind of not, just because in this case, it's just proprietary hardware. They're not going to tell you everything that's going on in there. And yeah, people keep saying something is a backdoor when it's not, and that's an issue.
Okay, this next one actually was sent to me by a CactusCon volunteer and then every other hacker I know. Because a group was issuing an ultimatum to Google saying that you should fire these two security researchers, and Newsweek published their names. And they took down their names, but not until after there was all these articles being like, who are these people? And I feel like this is kind of the most no-brainer candidate this year for the worst cybersecurity stories, because you really shouldn't post people's names unless it's newsworthy. And I don't think that being called out by sociopaths is newsworthy. So I feel like journalists are kind of trained to name names, but the world has changed. Just like we stopped naming names of, you know, serial killers because there's copycat killers. We can also not name people that are being called out by kind of edgy hacking groups. So.
All right. So there's at least one of these every year. And, you know, everybody in an annual basics decides they are literally El Chapo and can create a burner phone guide. And it's just like, you're not. All right. So this one's a little bit different. It's not as bad as some of the other ones, but in this case, has some ambiguity on using different terms for different use cases. Like we use this kind of term to say like burner phone versus a travel phone. And these are not necessarily the same things because in this case, burner phones have like a sort of connotation of anonymity that a secondary device that you have might not necessarily. There's also the thing is like drove me nuts is that what was left out is just like, you know, somebody's going to bring their actual phone to buy their burner phone. And like that specific like trail of data of seeing the sort of red dots on the screen travel together back from like the store where the phone was bought in cash. Like that's kind of a big tell that some of who that phone actually belongs to. There's also a lot left out beyond just kind of the SIM or eSIM identifiers, things like, for example, the IMEI identifier. There's a lot of like stuff in the hardware of your phone that has like sort of like hardware baked addresses. So, and in this case, and you know, this is one of those things where people are like, just buy like a cheap, crappy phone. I'm like, cool, run a criminally outdated version of Android and also use plain text messages because you can't get like a modern app to run on it because it's so old. This is a bad idea. Don't do that. But that's kind of the kind of like nuance and sort of like things that are not anticipated that are sort of left out. And yeah, just completely leaves out location data as like a vector for like what that correlation looks like between your burner phone and your real phone. And that's the thing is like cell technology, like the way the internet works, is extremely opaque. Like you think you know about it, and then you realize, oh no, this is just the first layer. Let me tell you all about these obscure protocols in 2G that are still like grandfathered into like everything since then. And most people in this case, for what the things they're looking for is something like a travel phone or something that a phone that maybe isn't necessarily like super like anonymous, but doesn't have your entire life on it. And there are good guides on location tracking that I think journalists and others could use. I have a screenshot on this, so just to make sure this is in context, this article is actually good. My coworker wrote this, and it's very long because there's a lot of, you know, it is turtles all the way down, so you're going to go see all the turtles. So this is just talking about all the different ways that like your location could be given away. It's great. Check it out.
Okay, this one is the one that we always get somebody who like is mad at something I have, and I think this might be the candidate. But there was an article about how you should not unsubscribe from email lists because it might be a scam, which led to other articles about how you should think twice before you click unsubscribe. And the reason this annoys me is because, you know, we have a law that was passed in 2003 called the Can Spam Act, which means that people are not supposed to send you unsolicited commercial email. There's some stuff about pornography, but also it says that you should be able to unsubscribe from a commercial email. And so, yes, there is a tiny chance that the unsubscribe email could be a phishing link or a scam, but I feel like if my inbox is unusable because I'm not able to unsubscribe from all these lists that I know I signed up for, or that like there was some deceptive design that made me sign up for 12 New York Times newsletters that I didn't really want to sign up for, or maybe I was trying to win a free hat. Like, I don't want to stay signed to these 5 zillion lists forever. And like, yes, you can hover over the unsubscribe link and make sure it's not some sketchy phishing link, or you can use your ISP's unsubscribe option, but I feel like this gives me anxiety and would kill me first. So I just think that you should not stay signed into those 5 zillion lists forever. And the articles recommend marking things as spam, My spam filters don't work very well. So yeah, that's not going to work. And they're like, clicking shows people you're a real person interacting with spam. Yeah, what if it's not spam? And then this is based on a study. It links to a study that says 1 in every 644 clicks on an unsubscribed link is potentially malicious. But I feel like I want to get off those 644 sites myself. So yeah, oops, I'm going the wrong way. Okay.
All right, last but not least, boy. All right, so this was a big story, and it's kind of amazing how many people like really sort of like missed the mark on this for understandable reasons, going back to cell phone stuff, which we'll get into. But how many of you have heard of the sort of Secret Service bust of the SIM farm in the New York tri-state area? Okay, cool. So this is one of those stories that came out and was essentially just like almost like kind of like just verbatim copy of talking points from the Secret Service saying that this was a huge like operation. It could definitely be used for terrorism. They were using it for encrypted messaging. They were basically saying that this would take down the New York cell network, that this was very close to the UN General Summit meeting that was happening at that time. There's a lot that got stretched in some of these statements. So in this case, like the idea that like this could knock out cell service in the New York City area, there's a few things to consider there. Like I felt like everybody basically just did not have their critical thinking caps turned on or on them. And I think there was a little bit more discourse that kind of like added some extremely important context from the hacker community to help sort of like put things into more of a reality check that I thought was very useful. So this is a very long thread from Prophet from 2600. And it talked a little bit about what this is. It's like it was something that was like trying to be portrayed as exceptionally unique, weird, and scary, where all signs, including all the photos that the Secret Service posted, indicated this was largely a relatively small like SIM farm, maybe a little bit bigger than others. They're all range in size, but it's basically just a very crimey normal SIM farm. Seemed to be the indication being used for normal crimey stuff, probably. And when you do something like this, your goal isn't to take down the very infrastructure that you're trying to sell access to. So there's sort of this like obvious reality misalignment where like, if I'm selling a service so that you can sort of have anonymous phone numbers to do like crimes or like spread misinformation on X or whatever, you need the cell phone networks to be up so you can do all that stuff. So in this case, it's like, does it actually matter to try to take down the cell network? Is that something anybody would actually like pay for or want? And also, can it actually do that? Because like we can also do math. Like if we have a specific number of SIM cards that we're looking at and we're saying like these connected to the New York City sort of like cell network system will cause a crash, then like, okay, so then what is the number of what normal amount of cell phones in like a city of 8 million people look like? And it turns out like, hey, cell service, as much as I complain about it sometimes in terms of T-Mobile access in New York, because that's where I live, is not constantly crashing or going down. Like the cell services are designed to handle this sort of thing. And there's a lot more kind of interesting kind of takes from Robert Graham on this also, where like the Times in this case like consulted some outside experts, but they weren't necessarily like experts in telco stuff. And then Marcus Hutchins also had a few takes on this. And this is one of those things that like, you know, the reason why we had this idea of like an independent free press to begin with is that we can't just trust the government to tell the truth all the time, or like not stretch the truth in a fairly significant way. And that's unfortunately kind of just what happened. It's just like, okay, we can copy and paste PR from the Secret Service too. Like we need reporters to do the work of actually like criticizing and like actually being critical about what's being said. So yeah, this is basically one of those things that like a lot of these things were like kind of true, but if you read between the lines, it's like this was within this much distance, thus it was close to the UN. There was no evidence to say there was anything correlated happening on that SIM farm relating to what was happening at the UN, and the UN has summits all the time, so it wasn't in and of itself significant. Proximity to the UN, in this case, the kind of like range they give, if you understand like the geography of like the teeny tiny states in the Northeast, That spans like 4 states. Like that's not near. Like it could have been in Connecticut for all we know. But the way they framed this was just so like obviously deceptive in a way that I thought should have been obvious, but apparently other people did not. And yeah, so I mentioned some of this already. It's just like this probably wouldn't actually check down the New York City cell network. And also they were very, very specific at saying like this was being used to send encrypted messages. SMS text messages are not encrypted. So they weren't talking about that. They were maybe thinking about, hey, we can use the phone number to sign up for Signal. Were they actually just throwing this in to make encryption sound scary so that you can associate encryption with crime, with terrorism, so that your legislature is more primed to regulate against it? All right. So yeah, these are things that I've already repeated, but you know, people just kind of believe government officials at face value. Don't. Outside experts were experts in some ways, but not others. They were maybe experts in like policy and things like that, but not necessarily like all the like weird nitty gritty of how cell technologies work or how criminals use them. And yeah, SIM farms are being used for warring crimes, etc. So let's go to the lessons learned for all this.
So journalists and editors, I feel like the easy one is do not dox security researchers. And then this one is, I kind of feel like a jerk for saying it, because if you're a journalist, you're kind of lucky to have a job at all. But I think it's like, try to get one where you don't have to write 1 or more posts a day. You're going to either have errors or write about things that can be misinterpreted to make things seem scarier than they are. If you do have to write about a hypothetical risk, make sure that you put that in context up top, which is really hard to do because I'm basically telling people like, oh, this article isn't actually anything that you'll have to deal with, but here's the info. And then like just developing really good sourcing, especially ones that will call you out on your bullshit. It will tell you like, oh, your basic premise is completely wrong. You need to build relationships with people that will tell you that. And when you do get access to a source, you have to ask them really good questions, and then do your own research instead of taking claims at face value. I feel like this is kind of drilled into you in journalism school. Like, if your mother says she loves you, check it out. So basically, like if a company, a government, or even a hacker tells you something, that does not mean that it's true. You also have to have a nuanced understanding of what you're writing about. I know easier said than done, but also just kind of get an understanding of things like backdoors and burner phones and etc.
All right, for security researchers, it's important to kind of understand real world risk versus hypothetical risk, the differences between like the dangers posed by proof of concept versus one thing that could exist in economic reality. Maybe know what to call a backdoor and not what to call a backdoor. And also just to involve yourself in the discourse. Like I feel like journalism is not, in this case, just didactic. It should be a discourse. It should be a two-way street. It should be something that people participate in the same way that democracy should be. And yeah, call stuff out when it's bad. All right. Questions?
We actually kind of went over, but
oh, thanks.
But yeah, we are around for questions. We'll also be in the hallway or over lunch, and also send us your worst articles, because we actually work on this talk all year. We scour the web for bad articles all year, and then we have this like massive document that we kind of whittle down at the end of the year. So please send us the stories you love to hate.
Send us your hot garbage. All right.